All right, so picture this. You're back in your childhood, bundled up, running from house to house.
Yeah.
The crisp autumn air filled with laughter
Right.
and the promise of overflowing bags of candy. That's the Halloween we all know.
Yeah.
But, believe it or not,
Mm-hmm.
it all started with a much darker and eerier affair 2,000 years ago
Oh, wow.
with the ancient Celts.
It's fascinating how a holiday that's now synonymous with sweet treats and playful costumes actually has its roots in a festival that was designed to ward off malevolent spirits and appease potentially bloodthirsty gods.
Exactly. We're diving deep into the evolution of Halloween this time.
Okay.
From its ancient origins as the Celtic festival of Samhain
Right.
to its modern-day incarnation as this global phenomenon.
Yeah.
You've sent over a fascinating collection of articles and research,
Yes.
and we're going to unearth the most intriguing nuggets for you.
Okay.
So buckle up, because you may never look at that jack-o'-lantern in the same way again.
So what's really interesting is how Samhain, this ancient Celtic festival, was essentially a liminal time,
Okay.
a point where the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead was believed to be at its thinnest.
Okay, so not your average backyard barbecue then.
Definitely not. For the Celts, this was a time of both celebration and genuine fear.
Oh, wow.
They believed that spirit friendly.
Right.
And these weren't your Casper the Friendly Ghost types either.
Yeah.
We're talking about some seriously menacing entities like banshees, wailing harbingers of death, and those mischievous fairies with a taste for human soul.
Oh, my goodness. It
Yeah.
sounds like a scene straight out of a horror movie, only this was their reality.
Yes.
So how do they deal with these unwelcome spectral visitors?
Well, they tried to appease them, of course.
Right.
And that's where the costumes and disguises came in.
No.
By dressing up as animals or monsters, they hoped to either scare off the malevolent spirits or blend in with them, essentially saying, nothing to see here, move along.
That's actually pretty clever. And I guess if you believe a terrifying fairy is lurking in the shadows,
Right.
a little dress-up doesn't seem so silly after all.
Precisely. But Samhain wasn't just about fear and appeasement.
Okay.
It was also deeply connected to the natural world, marking the end of the harvest season and the
Mhm.
beginning of winter.
Right.
It was a time to acknowledge the cycle of life and death, the ebb and flow of nature's power.
So they were acknowledging the darker side of nature while also celebrating its bounty. Kind of like a harvest festival with a side of spooky.
You could say that the Celts had a whole pantheon of gods and goddesses associated with various aspects of nature,
Right.
and Samhain was an opportunity to give them their due, ensure a good harvest,
Mm-hmm.
and secure their protection for the coming winter.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, what about those darker whispers of human sacrifice?
Yeah.
Did the Celts really offer humans to appease their gods?
It's a question that has fascinated and horrified historians for centuries. While the evidence is debated, there are accounts, even from Roman writers like Julius Caesar,
Okay.
suggesting that the Celts may have engaged in human sacrifice, particularly during times of great hardship or when seeking to appease specific deities.
That's a pretty grim twist on a harvest celebration.
Yeah,
It makes you appreciate how much our relationship with the unknown has changed over the centuries.
absolutely. But as we move into the early centuries, AD, another powerful force enters the picture: Christianity. The Catholic Church was making inroads into Celtic lands,
Mhm.
and they faced a dilemma. How do you convert people who are deeply attached to their ancient traditions?
Yeah, I imagine trying to convince folks to give up their costumes and spooky shenanigans wouldn't have been an easy sell.
Exactly. But the church came up with a surprisingly savvy strategy.
Oh.
Instead of trying to eliminate pagan traditions,
Yeah.
they decided to absorb them.
So a little bit of, if you can't beat them, join them.
You could say that. It was
Yeah.
a brilliant move,
Yeah.
really. They moved a major saint celebration to November 1st, calling it All Saints' Day or All Hallows' Day.
Mm-hmm.
And what about the eve before this holy day?
Well, if you follow the pattern, it would have to be All Hallows Eve, which, wait a minute, it sounds a lot like Halloween.
Precisely.
Oh.
It was a clever way to blend the pagans with the Christian, allowing people to hold on to familiar traditions while adopting new beliefs. It's fascinating to see how this tactic of absorption wasn't just about conversion.
Yeah.
It was a power move that shaped Western culture for centuries.
Right.
And Halloween is a prime example of its lasting impact.
That's incredible. So Halloween was essentially a church-approved rebranding of Samhain.
Exactly. And they didn't stop there. In the 11th century, they added All Souls' Day on November 2nd, dedicated to remembering and praying for the dead.
Okay.
This further absorbed elements of Samhain, addressing people's desire to commemorate loved ones, not just saints.
So we go from fearing fairies to praying for souls, all under the umbrella of what we now call Halloween. That's quite a journey.
And speaking of journeys,
yeah,
this is where we see a fascinating parallel to modern trick-or-treating emerge.
Okay.
Something called souling.
Souling. That sounds like a dance craze from the medieval era.
It wasn't a dance, but it did involve going door to door.
Okay.
Children would go from house to house, offering prayers for the dead in exchange for soul cakes.
Oh.
Simple pastries meant to represent a soul being released from purgatory.
Hey, purgatory. You're going to have to explain that one for those of us who go to Catholic school.
Of course, purgatory in Catholic doctrine is a state of purification after death, a sort of waiting room between heaven and hell. Souling was all about helping souls in purgatory by offering prayers in exchange for soul cakes.
Whoa.
And get this, these soulers would often paint their faces with soot, a bit like our modern-day costumes.
So trick-or-treating has its roots in medieval prayer transactions.
Yeah.
Who knew? But what happened to the whole fear of sin and evil spirits?
Right.
Did those just fade away with the church's involvement?
Well, while the church may have attempted to Christianize the holiday,
Right.
certain darker elements persisted.
Yeah.
And as Halloween spread to other parts of Britain, it continued to evolve, inspiring new customs and traditions.
Okay.
For example, in Scotland, we see evidence of Halloween poems, though not exactly Shakespearean sonnets.
Yeah. Were these spooky haikus?
Imagine lines like, "Some buckled on a bunwood and some on a bean."
Oh, my.
It's old Scottish dialect, challenging even for language experts to decipher.
Wow. Maybe not chart toppers.
Right.
But speaking of dark times, this was also the era of witch hunts, right?
Yes.
Did that impact Halloween celebrations?
It absolutely did. The political and religious landscape was shifting dramatically.
Yeah.
Remember, King Henry VIII broke from the Catholic Church in the 1500s,
Yeah.
creating the Church of England and sparking the Protestant Reformation.
Right. So Halloween, which was born from the Catholic Church's attempt to blend paganism and Christianity, was now caught in the crossfire of religious upheaval.
Exactly. When King James I, who was obsessed with witchcraft and demonology, took the throne,
Right.
Halloween, with its associations to the supernatural,
Yeah.
became a target. It was perceived as a threat, a celebration of witchcraft,
Okay.
particularly the witches' Sabbath.
So Halloween went from a pagan festival to a church-approved holiday to a demon-worshipping event, all in the span of a few centuries. Talk about a roller coaster. What happens next in this wild ride?
Well, as Halloween faced suppression in England, a rather intriguing figure emerged, embodying the spirit of mischief and trickery that has always been associated with the holiday.
Sounds like we're about to meet the original Halloween prankster.
Yeah.
Who are we talking about?
His name, or at least the name he's known by, is Stingy Jack.
Okay.
A blacksmith known for his love of drinking and playing tricks, even managing to trick the devil himself a few times.
Okay, I'm already liking this guy. But how does a mischievous blacksmith become a Halloween icon?
Legend has it that when Jack died, his less than saintly behavior earned him a rejection from both heaven and hell. The devil, still annoyed by Jack's trickery, sent him off into the eternal darkness with nothing but a burning ember to light his way.
That's a harsh sentence. So what did this Jack do with his ember? Did he start a ghostly bonfire?
No, but he did something rather ingenious. He carved out a turnip, placed the burning ember inside, and created a lantern to guide his wanderings. This, believe it or not, is the origin of the jack-o'-lantern, a symbol that has become synonymous with Halloween.
From mischievous blacksmith to eternal wanderer with a turnip lantern, what a story. It's amazing how these folk tales become intertwined with our traditions.
It is. And while the jack-o'-lantern's origins lie in Ireland, it wasn't until Irish immigrants brought their Halloween traditions to America in the mid-1800s that the pumpkin replaced the turnip as the carving canvas of choice. Pumpkins were larger, easier to carve, and readily available in the New World, making them a natural fit for this evolving tradition.
This blending of pagan and Christian elements
Yeah.
was what the Irish brought with them to America in the mid-1800s.
Right.
And it's where Halloween's American story really begins. But I imagine not everyone was thrilled to have these new, somewhat spooky traditions arriving on their shores.
You're right. The influx of Irish immigrants, particularly during the potato famine, brought a wave of cultural change, and not all Americans embraced it. Some particularly upper-class families who employed Irish servants found Halloween charming, even exotic. But others saw it as disruptive, even threatening.
It's interesting how celebrations that are so ingrained in our culture now
Yeah,
were once seen as foreign or even unwelcome by some.
right.
But how did Halloween go from being this niche immigrant tradition
Right.
to the massive celebration it is today?
It was a gradual evolution fueled by a number of factors. By the late 1800s, we see Halloween parties gaining popularity,
Okay.
particularly among children. Magazines were publishing articles on how to host these parties, offering tips on decorations, games, and spooky storytelling. It was becoming more mainstream, a part of American childhood.
So those Victorian-era parenting magazines were basically the first Pinterest for Halloween ideas. But didn't you mention something about mischievous pranksters earlier?
Yes,
Did those make the journey across the Atlantic too?
they did. Pranks and mischief were a part of Halloween in Ireland,
Right.
and those traditions came along with the immigrants. But as America urbanized in the early 20th century, those pranks escalated.
Oh.
We see a shift from harmless mischief to more destructive vandalism.
So it wasn't just toilet papering trees anymore. What kind of trouble were they getting into?
It was becoming a real problem. Kids were setting small fires, smashing windows, even tripping people on the street.
Wow.
By the 1930s, it was getting out of control, and some cities were actually considering banning Halloween altogether.
Wow, banning Halloween. Talk about a buzzkill. What happened? Did cooler heads prevail?
Fortunately, yes. Instead of an outright ban, communities started looking for ways to manage the mayhem.
Okay.
And that's where trick-or-treating, as we know it today, really takes off.
So trick-or-treating, the ultimate sugar rush, was actually a solution to social unrest.
Exactly. Instead of fighting the inevitable, the adults decided to leverage it.
Wow.
The idea was to offer treats as a way to redirect those youthful energies and keep them from causing trouble. Neighborhoods organized events offering costumes, spooky walks, and of course, plenty of candy.
Brilliant. A community-driven solution. And who doesn't love an excuse to stock up on candy?
Right.
But I imagine those early trick-or-treating events were a bit different from what we see today.
They were. It was much more community-focused.
Okay.
There were often organized parties, games, and activities, not just going door to door. But as the 20th century progressed, trick-or-treating evolved into the more independent door-to-door tradition we know today.
And I bet those candy companies weren't far behind, seeing a golden opportunity to market their sweet treats.
You're absolutely right. The commercialization of Halloween was in full swing by the mid-20th century. Candy companies saw the potential of this holiday, and they weren't shy about tapping into it. But even with the rise of commercialism, there was another major shift happening. Halloween was transitioning from a primarily children's holiday to one embraced by adults as well.
That's an interesting shift.
Yeah.
What do you think fueled that change? Was it just the candy companies realizing that adults have a sweet tooth too?
It was more than just candy, although I'm sure that played a part. A confluence of social and cultural factors came together to create this shift. The counterculture movements of the 1960s and 70s, with their emphasis on individuality and challenging norms, found a natural outlet in Halloween. It was a chance to express yourself, to embrace the unconventional, and to have fun while doing it.
So Halloween became a way to push boundaries, to let loose, and maybe poke a little fun at the establishment.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the counterculture movement. The LGBTQ community also played a significant role in shaping Halloween's adult appeal. Halloween parades, particularly the one in Greenwich Village, became a platform for visibility, a celebration of identity, and a space to challenge societal norms.
So from warding off evil spirits to embracing individuality, Halloween has become a canvas for personal expression.
Yeah.
But what about those darker, more thrilling elements of the holiday? Did those fade away?
Not at all. In fact, they were amplified by another major cultural force, horror films. John Carpenter's 1978 film Halloween, with its iconic masked killer and chilling score, had a profound impact on the holiday.
That film is a classic, and I've heard it was originally titled The Babysitter Murders,
Yeah.
which just doesn't have the same ring to it at all.
Agreed. Setting the film on Halloween and giving it that title cemented the holiday's association with horror and thrill, making it even more appealing to adults seeking a good scare.
So Halloween's evolution has been a fascinating blend of ancient traditions, cultural shifts, and the influence of media. It's incredible to see how this one holiday has managed to adapt and reinvent itself over the centuries.
Oh,
But we're not done yet, are we? Halloween's story continues to unfold, right?
it does. In recent decades, we've witnessed a fascinating new chapter.
Okay.
Halloween's global expansion. It's no longer confined to the Western world.
Really?
Yeah.
So we're talking jack-o'-lanterns in Japan and trick-or-treating in Thailand.
Well, maybe not to that extent, but the influence of pop culture media and those ever-present fast food promotions have spread Halloween's imagery and traditions worldwide.
Right.
Shows like The Simpsons, with their annual Halloween specials, have introduced the holiday to a global audience, and companies with international reach, like those fast food chains, have capitalized on the marketing potential of Halloween, further spreading its appeal.
So Ronald McDonald is basically a global Halloween ambassador.
You could say that. It's a testament to the power of media and marketing, but also to the underlying appeal of Halloween itself. There's something about this holiday with its blend of fun, fright, and fantasy that seems to resonate across cultures.
It's amazing to think that a holiday with such ancient and, let's be honest, somewhat dark origins has become a global phenomenon.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, where does Halloween go from here? Has it reached its final form, or is it still evolving?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Halloween today is this fascinating mix of ancient and modern commercialism and personal expression, tradition and reinvention.
It really is. I mean,
Yeah.
you have kids trick-or-treating adults going all out with costumes and parties,
Yeah.
horror movies dominating streaming services. It's like everyone's found their own way to connect with this one holiday.
And that's what's so remarkable about Halloween. It operates on so many levels. There's that pure childlike joy of dressing up,
Yeah.
the thrill of getting candy, the excitement of venturing out after dark.
And that appeal doesn't really go away with age, does it? There's still
Mhm.
something fun and liberating about putting on a costume, even if it's just for one night.
Absolutely. It allows us to step outside ourselves, explore different identities, be someone or something we're not in our everyday lives. And for some, it's a way to safely confront our fears, to play with the darker side of our imaginations.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that. It reminds me of those ancient Celts dressing up to ward off evil spirits. Even though we're not exactly worried about banshees snatching our souls these days, there's still that element of confronting and controlling our fears, albeit in a more playful way.
It's a great point. Halloween gives us the space to play with those boundaries between the real and the imagined, to acknowledge the darkness while also finding joy and humor in it.
And it's not just an individual experience.
Mm.
Halloween has this amazing ability to bring communities together.
Right.
Whether it's kids trick-or-treating with their friends and neighbors, or adults coming together for costume parties and events, there's a sense of shared experience of collective fun.
You're absolutely right. And while the commercialization of Halloween is undeniable, we're also seeing a growing movement toward more sustainable and DIY approaches.
Oh.
People are making their own costumes using recycled materials for decorations, finding ways to celebrate in a way that's more personal, meaningful, and environmentally conscious.
I love that. It's like return to the days before mass-produced everything, a reclaiming of the holiday's creativity and community spirit. So any predictions for Halloween's future? What trends do you see emerging?
Well, if history teaches us anything, it's that Halloween is always evolving, always adapting to the changing world around it. It's a holiday that reflects our anxieties and aspirations, our fears and our fantasies.
So maybe we'll be seeing costumes inspired by artificial intelligence or climate change in the years to come.
It's entirely possible. But one thing's for sure, Halloween, with its unique blend of history, folklore, and pop culture, has this enduring appeal. It taps into something primal, something we all share, a fascination with the unknown, a desire to confront our fears, and a need to connect with others through shared traditions and experiences.
So as you're carving your pumpkins or putting the finishing touches on your costumes this year, take a moment to think about Halloween's long and winding journey. From ancient Celtic rituals to modern-day celebrations, this holiday has come a long way. And ask yourself, what does Halloween mean to you? What aspects of this holiday do you connect with the most? Share your thoughts, and be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the fascinating stories behind the things we often take for granted.